On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, should the Thunder keep revolving their starting five? What's been the most impressive about this 3-0 start, and what questions still must be answered?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast. I'm Rylan Stiles, the host of Locked On Thunder, beat writer for Thunder on SI. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Joining us today on the show brought to you by Gametime. You can go there right now to download the Gametime app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Is Michael Martin at Michael on Sports on Twitter, and Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. The Thunder are off to a 3-0 start. Michael, how are you feeling today?
Feeling great. Feeling good. It's been a fun start to the season. I'm ready for more games and always happy to talk hoops with you.
We had 3 games in 4 nights in the preseason. Just came off of 3 games in 4 nights here in the regular season. It's been hot and heavy, but now we're really into the thick of things here in the regular season. They have a huge game on Wednesday against San Antonio, which we'll dive into a bit later on. But with the Thunder starting 3-0, Michael, what's been the most impressive part of this run?
I'll keep it simple. It's been Chet. I mean, we were all anticipating some growth from him coming off his rookie season, but it's like he's reached an entire different stratosphere as a player. He's still doing a lot of the same impactful stuff that we saw him do last season that sort of transformed this Thunder roster and elevated them, but he's just sharpened things up and then added even more. The 3-ball hasn't fallen just yet. Well, he had one the other night. He had a couple against Atlanta, but generally he started out 0 for 10, so that hasn't been there. But based off his track record, even pre-NBA, I think he's going to bounce back. His playmaking and aggression offensively and him just really hunting his shot has really impressed me. And just the extra work on his plate hasn't impacted him defensively at all. He still looks like he has all the energy to keep doing that. So overall, just the leap that Chet's taken. And I think even the biggest homers and optimistics would say they were a little bit surprised just how good he's looked this early.
Yeah, Chet's been stellar in season 2. He was 0 for this season entering Sunday, which was 0 for 10, and then he went 3 for 5 against the Hawks. So that 3-point shot coming around, but even in those 0 for 5 games, you saw the difference that this team can make for Chet with the shots that they can generate for him now that you're forced to play a center on him, and that center is just in such a bind because we've seen Chet attack the rim much harder than he did a year ago, which has led to a large part of his growth. And you're generating quality open threes for him, which started to fall Sunday, a trend I think will eventually continue. As you mentioned, that he's shot well at every level of basketball, including last year. I think he'll have shots fall for him again this year. Defensively, I think that the leap was there as well. I think that you can get caught up in the offense, but whenever you mention the defensive end, it just looks like a guy who simply has more seasoning, and that's not a hot take. He clearly has played a full 82 games for the first time. He saw the pictures, but it's just interesting to look at him, and we can tie Case into this as well. 2 guys who their baseline was already top-tier defense, but you just cannot replicate seeing NBA action, seeing NBA players, and that year off to adjust to it has done wonders for both these guys. And I don't really know what the ceiling is for them, those 2. I think that they can be some of the best defenders in this league because of their starting point.
Yeah, they've been unbelievable this season. A big part of it, like you mentioned, just getting that extra seasoning. It can't be just, I guess, underappreciated or understated. Just that extra tape of being able to watch film of you in it. Like Chet, last year, he's injured. Or 2 years ago, he's injured. So he's getting to know all the personnel, but he doesn't know what do I look like on the floor with those guys. And being able to do that, having more conversations with Mark and the coaching staff has really just helped them. I know Caruso mentioned in training camp that he thinks that Kaysen was playing a lot off instincts, but you can see, as you mentioned, just more and more comfortability for those guys, and they're really shining.
And whenever you look at this team, I don't think that the Thunder have played more than a B game. I mean, I guess you could argue B plus against Chicago in the end, but this is not their A game, even for as they're presently constructed, much less before adding in Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah, not at all. That's the thing is we watched them, and it's been really impressive when you just look at the box score and the numbers of they win this game by 20, they win this one by 15. But actually watching it, you just see there are shots that should be going in. We know what this team was capable of last year, and they're even more talented this year. So it's going to be really interesting to see what sort of heights that they reach.
And I talked about it on yesterday's show, but I just think that this can be a team that you look back on and say it's a historic group. And that doesn't always end in a championship. There's been all-time great teams that did not win a ring in that specific season, or sometimes in that whole era. You can go back to LeBron robbing great teams of rings, Michael Jordan running the league and robbing great teams of rings like the Utah Jazz. You can go back and look at those teams. They were still all great teams. They just did not get over the hump. I don't know if this team will or won't get over that championship hump. But what I do feel really strongly about, Michael, is that they're going to win a ton of regular season games, and they're going to be a team that we look back on in a couple of years. And I think that we can even have the foresight to do it already, but I know we don't eulogize teams until afterward, that they are a force to be reckoned with. And I mentioned it yesterday. I'll say it again today. I still stick by it, even though there were some comments that were not so flattering in the comment section of yesterday's pod. This team just has the avalanche effect, which is the telltale sign of a great team. They have not played high quality basketball for 48 minutes yet, but their defense and effort and ability to outwork you keeps them close enough, keeps them within striking distance. You can get down by 10 in a game multiple times throughout this 3-game winning streak, and it doesn't faze them at all because they know that their run's going to come, and eventually it leads to another lopsided win. And Sunday was a testament to that. Of the Hawks did nearly everything right. It's a 2-possession game entering the fourth quarter after they blew a 10-point lead, and by the 4-minute mark of the fourth quarter, it was just over. They're waving the white flag. You've had to call multiple timeouts in the frame, and they just kind of snowball on you, where it has this feeling of inevitability about this Thunder team, even though it's not the way the Warriors did it. It's not the way other great teams have done it offensively, but the defense is good enough to do that routinely in the regular season.
Defensively, they just overwhelm teams with their energy and athleticism and length, and we saw that against Atlanta. And you mentioned it; it's a good point. Defensively, you're going to have a chance in any game that you play this season, even if the offense is rolling. This team is going to buy you time, and I am of the opinion, and I think you are too. They're going to find a stretch here. They're going to play some good basketball. They're going to start hitting shots. As much as we've seen Isaiah Joe go 1 for 6, there's going to be a 6 for 7 game. That's just how it is. He's that lethal of a shooter. It's honestly reminded me of watching college football teams where teams play together for a while and it looks pretty similar, and then it's Georgia versus, I don't know, Illinois, and then they separate and you're like, oh, these are some guys on one end, and then Georgia has some dudes, and they just completely blow the game out of the water. And it seems like the Thunder just over and over and over, especially in those second units, come in, just overwhelm teams.
Yeah, and I think that my most impressive thing this season has been the fact that they're not shooting the ball well, but they're still living up to their promise of taking more threes. They're 11th in the NBA right now in three-point attempts per game. They've climbed by over 4 attempts per game from last year. And why I think that that's so impressive is we often think about threes as settling, of oh, these teams are settling for threes. The Thunder kind of have the opposite of I'm actually impressed that they have not settled for just driving, because it's got to be frustrating for guys like Shea to see his efficiency drop, for guys like J-Dub to not have it going offensively. We mentioned Chet was 0 for 10 during a 2-game stretch where he played near perfect. It's got to be frustrating for that to happen whenever and you displayed a year ago, hey, in the regular season, when these teams are not engaged, we can get downhill and we can get to the rim every single possession and just dominate games. But that doesn't help your end goal. We know in the playoffs you need to shoot threes, you need to make threes. And so the fact that they stuck with it through 2 really bad shooting nights, they labored from beyond the arc in the first quarter on Sunday and eventually let themselves shoot out of it. They shot 40% Sunday from 3 whenever the game was all said and done. I've just been impressed with how much that they've stuck to that plan, and I think that that's a sign that they're going to do it all year long, which I think is the key to get to your end goal of a championship.
Yeah, the 3-point volume is going to be one of the make or break things for this team. And I would go back to the point we made about Chet, where he's been a good shooter his entire career, even pre-NBA. Shea, just the numbers that he's stacked over the last few years and put on paper, same with J-Dub, they have enough reason to feel confident of this is just a cold stretch. It'd be very different if they were historically poor shooters and they get off to a bad start and you can feel here we go again. But I feel like none of those guys are feeling this is something that's oh, I need to change my shot, I need to fix something. And to your point that you mentioned, they've been able to add more threes without compromising their identity as more of a drive and kick team, a team that wants to get downhill and wants to get into the paint, and that's been really, really impressive.
Yeah, it has not been a forced, jump in attempts. Like they have jumped over 4 shots, but it's not been by nature of, okay, Mark wants us to shoot, so just every time on the floor, let's just shoot a 3 and live with it. They're still working and getting great looks. Mark even said yesterday that the way that they grade shot quality, it's better shot quality than it was a year ago. They're just not going in at the clip that they were last year, where they were the top team in the league in 3-point percentage. I think that eventually they'll start to go in. I think as soon as Wednesday, they'll start to go in. As you saw, the tide kind of turn a little bit against Atlanta, shooting 40%. But coming up, should the Thunder keep revolving their starting 5? Plus, it's early, but what hills are we willing to die on about this Thunder team? But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at Gametime. Go check out the Gametime app today, because Gametime is incredible. I think that the NBA season is the perfect time to use Gametime, because we know that you enter every single game and some stars questionable. One of your favorite players might not play. We don't really know until right before tip-off, and that's where Gametime comes in. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So today, when John Morant is a late scratch with a thigh bruise, you can go and say, I'm going to sit this one out, and I'll go back to a game tomorrow or the next day whenever he's healthy. So you can go and wait it out at Gametime for the final injury report. I also love their all-in pricing, where you toggle that feature on and you get the exact total up front, no surprises at checkout, and the view from your seat. If you're going to travel around with the Thunder or any other team, you can go and see a panoramic view from your seat to know exactly what you're going to get. I get a lot of DMs saying that you guys are coming in for your first ever Thunder game. If you've never been to the Paycom Center before, you can get that view from your seat on Gametime. Go download the Gametime app today, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. Create your account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Gametime. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joining us today is Michael Martin at Michael on Sports. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. I'm Rylan Stiles. Michael, 3 games, 3 different starters. Nary of the 3 have been what many of us expected it to be, which was Caruso in place of Giddey. It's been Joe in place of Giddey. It's been Kaysen in place of Giddey. It's been yesterday Wiggins in place of Giddey. What do you make of the revolving starting 5, and what's your stance on what they should do in the starting 5 now that we've seen these lineups kind of play together a little bit?
I mean, this wasn't super surprising. I know we had the comment where Mark said, the starters are going to be fluid, but I feel like you and I were on this pretty early, just knowing sort of how Mark operates. Obviously, the circumstances were very, very different 2 and 3 years ago, but we saw Mark tinker and try out just tons of different starting lineups to kind of just see what works. And I think the Thunder are in a nice spot where they can kind of keep that 5th spot just rotationally open, and I think that's what they're going to do. As for Caruso not starting, I think that's actually the right move. His connective skills as like a playmaker, I think, are really, really needed off the bench, and then just the energy that he provides. Like, he had a few stretches there, like in the 4th and in the 2nd quarter, where he just flipped the game just by himself and his energy, which I think is massive. But if you're going to hold me to say, like, what is going to be the most common starting lineup, I think it's going to be Kaysen. I think it just makes the most sense. He's a guy who Mark really, really trusts, he's really high on. And just, you can't underrate or understate the impact that it has where you can put Lou and Kaysen on the 2 best guards or wings and just give some extra time and the luxury to let things be easier on Shea and J-Dub.
Yeah, I think that everything will be fluid with Mark, and you've got to give these things time. This rotation won't really be remotely set until after the trade deadline, really, because you factor in that Hartenstein's out 5 to 6 weeks. Then you're trying to work him in. If you still want to play Ousmane Dieng, who's been really good this year, that's another piece of the puzzle that people weren't factoring in over the summer. Like, there's a lot of stuff up in the air right now where you just got to give it time to kind of sort itself out. I still believe that your best 5 right now are Shea, Caruso, Dort, Dub, and Chet, and that starting the game with that tone setting could help you not fall behind by 10. So I would still start Caruso. I wonder if this is a kind of nod to, hey, we're going to try everything. We're going to give all of our in-house guys a shot to earn it. And then they're going to settle into Caruso being the starter once they've gone through this merry-go-round. But the only real hard and fast stance I have on the starters is I don't want Wiggins to start, which is going to be surprising to most who've heard this show for a couple of years now, where I just cannot stop raving about Wiggins. But I look at Wiggins, and he did everything right yesterday. He was a really good player yesterday. It has nothing to do with his production. It has everything to do with, as you highlighted, what Caruso can do for the bench. Wiggins is one of the only guys on that secondary unit who I trust to get to their spots and get to the rim. And his ability to probe the lane and go to that spin move and finish off the glass, like his ability to score at all three levels, plus his versatile defense, I think is what makes him a weapon off the bench. Plus, he just brings a certain juice to any lineup he's ever in, that you can almost use him as a break glass in case of emergency if you have a sluggish night, if you have a slow night. And I just think that punch is better served off the bench. But he himself has earned every right to start. He himself played well in that starting role. I just think that for the big picture of the team, there's a lot to be said for that element coming off the pine.
I agree with you, and we saw it in preseason, but we haven't seen him in, like, he's a dynamic cutter. Playing him next to Hartenstein is going to be really, really effective this season. And I'm with you. Wiggs just kind of plugs into any lineup. He plays a variety of roles and does everything well. So I think that's better served off the bench with just some energy guys. But it's going to be really interesting to see what Mark kind of does. But I think it's going to be very, very fluid throughout the season.
So with the starting five, we'll see if they go 4 for 4 on Wednesday. If they retread one of these, three guys, that'll be very interesting. But what other questions do you have about this team? It's all hunky-dory right now. Tim Legler is calling them a juggernaut, which is high praise from a guy who's one of the most respected minds in basketball, former player. Like, what questions are still out there for you even after the 3-0 start?
We touched on it earlier, but just what is this team's ceiling offensively? Mark mentioned, as you even talked about earlier, that they had games before where he felt like the shots were better. They just didn't fall like they did against Atlanta, and that's a big part of it. And then just what they look like with Hartenstein back, a lot of guys hopefully settling in from three, and I just wonder what they're capable of. They have a chance to put together some really special two-way lineups for 48 straight minutes, and I think this team's identity might be on the defensive end, but when they get clicking on offense near what we saw that they were possible, or what they were capable of last year, it's going to be really, really interesting and probably some pretty frequent blowouts for the Thunder.
Yeah, my question isn't, I think that we oftentimes look at questions about a team and think of them as negative. Mm-hmm. Mine's not negative so much as, like, I'm still curious on what AJ Mitchell is and what his role looks like when this team is fully back, because those minutes have to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
But man, AJ's been incredible defensively. I think that, like, his box score, much like Ous, has not, like, jumped off the page at you, but when you really go break down the film of why these possessions are working and why, Shea and Caruso and Chet, like, why these guys are collecting those defensive stats, a lot of it has to do with those two guys, and players that aren't getting the stats being in the right position and allowing those players to afford to go gamble and go get the actual steals and the actual takeaways. I think that Mitchell's been awesome defensively, better than I thought he was, in the sense of, I thought watching him in college that he could defend 1 through 3, and 3 might be kind of the end of it, but he's been able to switch 1 through 4 really well, especially with the help that the Thunder can send and their rotation and switch heavy defense. So I think that he's been good on that end. On the offensive end, a question that we've harped on all summer long, Michael, is about the secondary creator and who's going to be that playmaker for the bench unit. And his lob to Chet for the end one was the exclamation point on a rookie who's really making advanced reads, and a guy who has not gotten in on the scoring just yet in high bunches, but a guy who I really think can score at the rim. He's getting there right now. He's just got to have better body control and finish through the contact, which comes with being able to see NBA speed, because he's not only coming from college, he's coming from a mid-major where, with all due respect, you're not seeing NBA guys night in and night out, especially not 1 through 5, whenever you're on the court. So I'm curious what Mitchell looks like when the G League starts, and because, like, right now, like, there's no other option. Like, you're going to have him on the team, you might as well use him. Plus, you're down 3 rotational guys, and if he can kind of sustain this play, and if he can kind of grab that secondary playmaking role, because I think Hartenstein can really help in that area as someone who's kind of underrated in that aspect because he's a center. But I think that he can make the secondary creator be more, viable because of how he can set up J-Dub and other guys whenever he's in there on staggered lineups. But AJ certainly can as well. And I think that you've seen Mark trust young guys. You've seen this Thunder team trust two-way guys. Where does that level off at once you get to the point where this team is healthy?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. That's a good question to have. AJ's really impressed me as well. He just fits into the system like a glove. He just is in the right spots all the time. He doesn't do anything that just jumps off the page like you mentioned, but he doesn't screw anything up, which is what you want out of a guy on a second round pick who's joining a team that was the 1 seed last year. You just want them to contribute and not really take anything away. And he's a guy that, like, Milwaukee would kill to have him right now. That type of player. But as you said, there's only so many minutes that go around, and I think that Hartenstein, to your point, is going to make up a lot of that playmaking. And then I also just hope and pray, just the same way I've been talking about this for a very long time, that Caruso can supplement some of that, because we really need to see the initiating sort of ball handling from J-Dub in those secondary lineups. But AJ Mitchell, it's a great problem to have, that you have too many guys to play and not enough minutes, and it's going to be interesting to see what he looks like, and maybe he's a guy who, like Lou Dort, just outplays his two-way contract and gets a full roster spot.
Yeah, he could be the next in line of a Dort, of a Wiggins, and of these kind of guys who are able to accomplish that goal. And I do still believe they'll play for the Blue. I do still believe that, of course, Dylan Jones will play for the Blue. And I think that despite Dylan Jones being the first-round pick, he is a bit more raw. I mean, he's not the speed, I don't think, defensively to play NBA regular season minutes, which is why you're largely not seeing him in the regular season and you were in the preseason. And while he had a great preseason offensively, I just don't think that he's there within the system yet. And he fully understood that, talking to him in training camp about his role and about the possibilities of what his rookie season looks like. I think that that's no slight to Dylan Jones. I think that both those guys will play for the Blue. The good news is the Blue play the exact same way the Thunder do, which I think is just great for their cohesive unit and their cohesiveness in terms of player development. And that's why they've had so much success. But coming up, Michael, what hills are you already ready to die on? We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. For your next listen, check out Locked On NBA. We have Locked On NBA game nights Monday through Sunday, recapping the full slate of games each and every night. I'm on game nights on Saturday nights if you want to subscribe to that, plus our midday show on that same feed with Matt Moore and Hayes taking you through the biggest conversations in the NBA. Right now, we're talking with Michael Martin at Michael on Sports, and Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael, I'm going to give you my hill I'm going to die on. And we're 3 games in. Call me crazy. Maybe we're jumping the gun here, but I'm willing to die on the fact that Hartenstein and Chet playing together, while it is like the eye-popping and the dream scenario that people have like conjured up in their minds and been daydreaming about since the signing. Yes, that's awesome. But I think it's still just a curveball. It's an out pitch. It's not your fastball that you go to routinely, because this team, you're just seeing how much better they look with one center on the floor. And when you put Chet and Hartenstein together, you're going to have to sacrifice some things on your perimeter defense. But if you have only one in at a time, you can continue to play your brand of basketball, because Hartenstein, while not the level of Chet at the rim, he's still a really good rim protector, like really, really, really good. So you can just play the same style with those two guys on the floor as individuals. And then you throw a little curveball. Here's 5 minutes of a double big lineup to throw a team off kilter. But I still think that it should be in sporadic doses and not something that you go to as like your starting 5 or your closing 5 every single night. I think it's just more of an out pitch.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's going to be more sporadic in the minutes, like you mentioned. I think that there's going to be some nights where you don't see it at all against smaller teams, and then against the bigger teams like the Celtics, who play 2 bigs with Horford and Porzingis, you're going to see both those guys out there more. Last season we saw with Mark, I think it would be generous to call it a small sample size of Jay, Will, and Chet. And I just hope that this season, like you mentioned, they don't sort of put too much out there. They don't overuse it, but at the same time, I want to see really, really how much chemistry they can build over the course of a season, because that's going to be huge in the playoffs.
It will be. But what hill are you dying on at 3 games in?
Well, on this first pod last week, you asked me who's the most underrated player that we can't stop talking about this season, or we won't be able to, and I took Cason Wallace, and I'm sticking with that. I think we're going to continue to see him take strides on both ends and get even more national attention from even some national pundits who probably don't even remember that he's on the team or are going to be wondering how the Thunder got this guy. He was unbelievable the other night against Trae Young. He put him in just a straitjacket essentially for 5 straight possessions. And then offensively, it's been more of a slow burn in his development, but he's breaking out of that sort of 3-and-D role archetype, and he's continuing to show more and more growth in his handle, his playmaking, finishing talents, and improved shot making from all 3 levels. I'm about as high on Cason as you're going to get out there, and I think he's going to continue to just ascend on this Thunder roster.
Yeah, I think that Cason is going to get his due credit because he's a guy that with all these defenders, and Joe Mazzato pointed out yesterday, like he's the 4th or 5th or 6th best defender on this roster, but he's the guy who turned an entire game for you yesterday. And I think that is repeatable in the biggest moments of this season, whether it is in February or whenever they play Boston or it's in the postseason. Like the biggest moments that you're watching the Thunder play and the entire NBA world is watching the Thunder play, I do think that it'll have some impressive performances that capture a national audience. I am going to also give a bonus one. You don't have to give another one if you don't want to, but maybe let's call this a molehill instead of a mountain or like a massive hill. But yeah, I'm still going to die on the fact that Ousmane Dieng has progressed. I have an article out at 7 a.m. on Tuesday about this very thing. I tweeted out a video about Ous today. I've been screaming this from the mountaintops, Michael. You've had to suffer through a lot of G League rants from me about Ous progressing in the G League. But Ous just looks so much more confident. He looks so much more aggressive. And being in the right spots has done wonders for him, putting bodies on guys at the rim to help shoulder some of the rebounding blows. Even if he's not the one who grabs the rebound, he helps get it to another Thunder player to end a possession. Defensively, he's making the right rotations and right decisions. I mean, you go back and you watch that Hawks game, and in 16 minutes, he made one defensive mistake. He played a little bit too high on Okongwu one time on the break, and Okongwu just blew right past him because why would you play Okongwu out there at the three-point line? But other than that one single possession, he was always in the right spot. He was always helping in possessions. And offensively, even in his three-pointers missed, like they're missed because the ball just didn't go in. Whereas last year, he was missing shots because he did it. He'd kind of like pump fake. Oh, should I shoot? I don't know if I should shoot. And then it would just be a possession ender. He's keeping everything in rhythm. And there was even an opportunity in this game against the Hawks where he gets the ball on the perimeter. There's a hard closeout. He knows he can't shoot it. He drives, makes a skip pass to Joe, who sets up Wiggins, to J-Dub, who sets up Wiggins for a wide open three after Wiggins takes a step back. Like that constant ball movement and understanding this system because they play the same way in the G League, it's finally showing itself. Whereas last year, whenever I was talking about this, nobody cared because nobody's watching the Blue and Skyforce except for me and the other sickos. So I just think that he's getting to show it now. And I'm just really excited for what the future holds for this 21-year-old.
Yeah, he's been good to start this season. I would point to he's being way less indecisive on a lot of these shots. Like you mentioned, the pump fake, like should I do it, should I not? It seems like he is very, very confident in everything that he's doing. Defensively, like you mentioned, that's where he stood out to me for a very long time, is he's just been solid there. And he's continuing to sharpen himself up on that end. I guess my only question is, you mentioned, like, he's not, doesn't look like there's any anxiety or any fear taking these three-pointers. I wonder if that continues if he does have a cold stretch for a couple weeks. If he kind of reverts back to that, or if this is just who he is. I hope that I'm wrong and this is who he is permanently, but I think that's one of my bigger questions.
Yeah, and that's a great question because in the G League, he went through some poor shooting spells, and he did not shy away from shooting the ball. He was consistent all year long at shooting it, but there's also been times in the G League where he looks a certain way at one point, and then when he gets to the NBA level, and it looks completely different, and then we look like fools for talking about the G League status of his. But I wonder, Michael, if you agree with me on this statement, because this might be where I push the Ous propaganda too far. I'm willing to admit that on the front end.
I'm ready.
I think that Ous can get better by a byproduct of this roster in 5 to 6 weeks, whenever he's not playing the 5, and instead he's playing the 4, a more natural position, a more comfortable position, because he did play the 5 for the Blue, and he was able to play the small ball 5, but with the Blue, those rosters in the G League are set up more so like summer league rosters. It's just 12 wings, and you're trying to coal mine your way to a diamond in the rough of a guard and a perimeter player. You're not looking for lumbering bigs in the G League more often than not. So he played the 5 in name only at points because everybody is just a perimeter player. But he's playing the 5 right now against legitimate NBA centers and guys who have a billion plus attribute points to their size compared to him. And I think that he's holding his own clearly through the first 3 games. And I think it can look even better just by being in a more natural state once you're able to slide him to the 4. But with that being said, how do you get on the floor whenever you have Hartenstein back, J. Will back, Kenrich back?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's going to come down to how well he's shooting from 3. I think he's another guy who could very, very well I don't know. He is going to complement Hartenstein well. He's going to benefit from Hartenstein's passing on a lot of these plays, and I think you're right totally that his more natural position is the 4. And if he can get into those lineups and be a more consistent three-point shooter than either Kenrich or Jay Will, I think it's going to buy him a lot of stock, and it's going to give him a lot of opportunities this season.
And I wonder if part of his emergence this year is he's 21 years old. It's like It's natural for a guy who's 21 to look better than he did when he was 20 and whenever he was 19, 18, etc. But also, I wonder if it's a sort of a cream rises to the top situation where he's always been kind of a luxury, like a forgotten piece in the Thunder's puzzle up to this point, where now, hey, Oos, we really need you right now because there's no one else here to stop the bleeding in the front court if you're not up to the task. So, it's now or never for you to show up and really help us out, because without you, it's really bleak in the front court. And that kind of, you can call it pressure, I guess. That kind of pressure makes diamonds, is the old saying, has helped him feel more confident, feel more maybe needed. I don't want to kind of speak for him, but feel more a part of something. Now that is purely speculation, but I wonder if there's a little bit of that too of it's Oos or nobody. So Oos, you better sink or swim and really help us out here.
Yeah, I've been impressed by that because it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure he's wanting opportunities to play more. Here's an opportunity. What are you going to do with it? And so far, he's played really, really well in that role. And touching on him kind of being a luxury and one of the forgotten young players that it's sort of developing, I think it's sort of unfair, and I think that Thunder fans are spoiled in a way just because guys like Chet, J-Dub, and Kaysen are anomalies as guys who came in ready to play and just impacted things immediately. Most of these guys, younger players, lottery picks, are more raw than those guys and are going to take a few years in the slow cooker. And he's only been sent down to the G League because the Thunder have so many other talented players who are going to play in front of him. If he was playing on a team like Utah or Charlotte, we would have seen a much bigger sample size of him. But I'm encouraged so far with what we've seen from him this season.
And I'll give Mark credit. Like, as the self-appointed, I guess, Ousmane Dieng beat writer, I've asked Mark about Oos for the last 3 years, and the message has been the same the entire time. He needs to get more forceful offensively, and every time that you ask for an update, he's progressing well, and they understood it was going to be a long-haul process for him, unlike for J-Dub, who was a multi-year college guy, and Chet, who was a unbelievable phenom. And so, even J. Will in that same draft class was a multi-year college guy. So, like, of course, those guys are way more developed than he was. And it just so happened that what they couldn't foresee happening on draft night in 2022 was that in year 3, at 21 years old, you're in a situation where this team is expected to go win a championship. And I think that without going to the Western Conference Finals, there's a lot of people disappointed in this Thunder team. That was never in the cards whenever you were making that selection. And I don't think it would have changed anything, but all it does change is fan perception and fans' lack of patience for these things. And whenever you see it unfold in the G League, and then you get to finally see it in front of you, I think this 3-game stretch, if nothing else, has presented sort of a sigh of relief to Thunder fans. Like, okay, this guy is getting better. This guy is coming along, and he still does have that kind of talent that he was billed as a prospect.
Yeah, and the thing is with the Thunder having this many picks, and I'm not saying that they have on Oos, jury's still out, and I'm encouraged with what we've seen. They're going to miss on some guys. Not everyone's going to hit at the same level of Chet, Dub, Kaysen, and all those other guys. But Oos is going to have his opportunities, and if he continues to play this well, he's going to be hard to keep off the floor because he is such a unique player as a playmaker who can play at the 4, the 5, the 3. He can play a variety of positions. He can shoot the ball. He can beat you off the dribble. He's a solid playmaker with a high basketball IQ and a lot of feel. Like, when you lay it out like that, he is like the prototypical new age Thunder player, but we just haven't seen him enough. And I agree with you, the sort of sigh of relief, but it's not just that he's been, he's in the G League, but it's not like he just hasn't been doing anything. It's just been sort of less notable and under darker lights.
Yeah, I really love the way that Mark titled it last year whenever I asked about it, of in the shadows of the G League, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's the Paycom Center at noon. There's 10 people there unless it's field trip day, and it's just me watching freaking basketball, watching hoops. So and then they got to come talk to me, which is never good. Even you don't like talking to me, so I feel for them. I really do. But Michael, this was a lot of fun. Let them know. What can we expect on Let's Talk Thunder? What can we expect even on Michael on Sports on Twitter? Just what's going on?
On Twitter, you're going to see a lot of updates and memes throughout the games, live tweeting, a lot of fun stuff like that. As for YouTube, I mentioned last week that I was working on a Chet video. That is still on the way. I mentioned to you that I want to get some more sample size of how well he's playing, but there will be one breakdown video this week. I'm going to try to get them out weekly, which I'm excited for, but I haven't exactly nailed down the topic. But as always, happy to be on here. Glad you invited me on. I'm looking forward to next week.
Next week will be fun. This week of Thunder basketball will be fun as well. We'll be back on Wednesday. Until then, be good and be good to one another.